Welcome everybody from Sparx Systems YouTube channel. My name's Scott and it's great to have you here with us today. Once again, we're looking at our urban parking system that's been developed in Enterprise Architect, and we've been slowly over these YouTube videos building up a very comprehensive overview of a range of different models that help support our urban parking system. I'm joined today by Stephen, and I understand, Stephen, we're looking at the choreography diagram that's part of BPMN today. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Scott, and thank you for the introduction. Always a pleasure to be here. Many of the people that are listening to this video may be familiar with the business process model and notation process diagram, or maybe flowcharts that are a precursor to that type of diagram. We are going to be looking at the framework or the language business process model and notation, but we're not going to be looking at the process diagram initially. We're going to be looking at a choreography diagram, which is a little bit different from the process diagram and defines the way that business participants coordinate their interactions. So the focus is not on the work that's been performed, but rather on the exchange of information between the parties involved. And in BPMN, we call them participants. So let's make a start. As always, we want to go and set our perspective. I've been doing some work with the Microsoft Azure framework and creating some models there. I'm going to change our focus now to business modeling. And so we can see the perspective set here, business modeling, and a perspective BPMN. So I'm going to select that perspective. And once again, the tool changes to focus us on that work that we want to do. We have, as always, the builder page come up, and we have a number of different patterns that we can inject into our model. So this is a way of getting a kickstart into modeling, but as always, Scott, I like to start from first principles. Once we understand things from first principles, we can come back and reuse some of these very useful patterns. So we'll close the project builder there, and we need to find a location in our project browser, in our repository, for the models that we're going to do. So let's have a look here. They are business models, and you can see that we have a business models package. So let's open that up, and we have in there a business case that we had created earlier. So if we look at that, we could open that up and look at that model. But let's now focus our attention on this choreography diagram. So we're going to create a new package in here under the business models package, and we'll call it a BPMN 2 participant choreography, and it's between the parking provider and the city council. So we're going to have a look at that. So BPMN 2 participant choreography parking provider. So let's go and create a diagram there. And we're going to click on BPMN 2 as the type. And we've got, you can see, a number of different diagram types. So these are BPMN group, that's the perspective, and we have the diagram types here. Let's click on the choreography one and create that diagram. We get challenged by a box that asks us whether we want to create the diagram within a new choreography model or to create it directly within the package. It's recommended, and my belief that it's better to create that choreography model first. So let's do that. And you can see now that we've got in the project browser a choreography model. And we can just move the pane over here a bit to have a look at that. So let's open up that diagram, and you can see it has been created underneath that model. And the diagram's open there. Let's get started and see if we can populate this model with some useful things. Well, the tool has given us focus, and it's provided a toolbox there with a number of items that are related or useful for the modeling choreographies. We can see that there's both elements and also connectors. But below that, Scott, is another collapsed toolbox page, which gives us BPMN types. So there are all sorts of quite interesting things in here. We'll have a look at this in passing, but it might be that we cover this in a more advanced course than this, or this video that's an introduction to this type of modeling. So let's just collapse that for a minute, and let's make a start here, and we'll put in a start node, which is always a good place to begin our proceedings. Put the start event in. I'll put it roughly there, and I'm not going to put any indicator there, any marker for what that is. I'm going to give it a name. And remember, Scott, as always, I always like to put in notes into these things to indicate to people exactly what's happening. So let's drop some notes in there about that. Triggered when the City Council identifies the need for a modernised parking management system. And we can now move over to a choreography. So let's drop a choreography onto the diagram, and let's call this one a request for proposal phase, or request for proposal. So we can simply rename that element there. So this is what the choreography is about. Think of it a little bit of like a dance choreography, like a ballet choreography, where you're kind of describing the things that are going on in the dance. So that's what we've got going on. And once again, we should put in some notes, and I always encourage people to do this. So we've got our element selected there. We can put in some notes, and it says the initial procurement phase where the City Council outlines the requirements for a comprehensive urban parking solution. So that's what we're up to. And notice that there are a couple of bands at the top of this element and at the bottom. And this is where, you know, the interesting things start to happen with this model. We need to connect this model up, and we can draw a line there, and we'll say sequence flow 2. So we've started at our start event, and now we're starting to move along. So how do we describe the people that are going to participate in this? Well, if we click on this element, and I encourage you whenever you're modeling, no matter what you're modeling, to be able to look at the properties window, which is conveniently docked over here. I can make more space in this by dropping the notes down a little bit, the notes bar. And if you look in here, Scott, you can see that
now, I can see it says number of participants, but where are those participants?
Yeah, so let's look at this one, participant A, and let's put in the City Council, who are the ones that are kind of responsible for this whole venture. And let's put in for the participant B, the parking provider.
I can see they're appearing in the bands now. Very good.
Yeah, so that's what's going on there. We've got 2 participants. We could have more participants in a particular model. We could have, you can see in here, we could have up to 4 participants, really. They wouldn't appear in 4 different bands. They would appear in a different choreography, and we can, again, look at that in a more advanced video. Let's now look at how this thing, starts. We have put a start event in there, but let's look at a message that the council might start with. So we're going to drop a message onto the diagram, and we'll give it the name request for proposal. So anyone that's familiar with procurement process or these kind of projects will understand that, this is the kind of way that things often start, a request for proposal. Let's connect this element up to the City Council by an association. You can see that comes in as a dashed line. And once again, Scott, let's, as always, write some notes in here to describe exactly what this message is about. So again, we'll put that up now that we've got our participants there. Comprehensive document detailing the city's requirements for a smart parking system, including technical specifications, etc. So now, how would the parking provider respond to that? Well, they're likely to submit a proposal, right? So that's what they're likely to do. And again, we overtly put this message in here, and let's call it submit proposal there. So once again, let's get some notes in here so that we're clear, and people that are looking at the models for the first time are clear what's happening. And once again, let's connect this up to that choreography with an association. So that's the beginning of it, Scott, but there's something kind of interesting about these things is we want to understand the the order that these messages are happening in, and yet we don't have any way on the diagram to, describe that order. But BPMN comes to the rescue there and allows us to look at a message and say whether it was an initiating message or not. So
Right.
the default is true. And so when we put the request for proposal on by the council, if you look over into the properties window, you can see that under the message group and in the item, items there, we have is initiating, and it's defaulted to true. And that's what we do want for that particular message. But the submit proposal message was not the initiating message. It was in response.
It's responding, yeah.
Yeah. So let's make that false and have a look what happens on the diagram. It changes its color to indicate that it wasn't the initiating message. So there we have the beginning of a choreography, I guess, but the choreography continues. And what we need to do now is to select this element and continue our choreography into the next thing that's going to happen. So think about it like a dance sequence where, something's gone on in a particular part of the stage, and then, something else is going to go on and flow into another part of
use the quick linker there, and there's lots of options. Are all of those options kind of determined by the specification for BPMN and choreography diagrams?
That's right, Scott. One thing to realize is that Enterprise Architect is not making things up, right? It's a tool that supports the frameworks and the language standards, and the business process model and notation is one of those standards, and the choreography diagram is part of that standard. And if you were to look at the specification, you would see that is described. And what the tool has done is it's implemented that standard. And so the take home for the audience and the real benefit is that you don't need to think about whether something's valid or not. You can simply use this quick linker to say, what I want to do is a choreography. So what are the relationships that I'm allowed to use? So we've chosen choreography because that's the next thing that we want to do as a modeler. And we've been presented with two options, sequence flow to or sequence flow from. And clearly that's not a very difficult decision. I'm moving along to the next part of the dance, the next part of the choreography. So it's going to be sequence flow to. I can just line that up. The quick alignment tools, make that very easy to do. And the choreography for this one is going to be about the contract acceptance. So, we'll look at that and we'll put that in. And once again, Scott, we do want to just describe that in detail. So let's put that in here and put some notes in there about the contract acceptance. Now, that's that's the basis of the way that this choreography diagram works. So I'm going to finish this diagram, but I'll get you to perform some time travel magic, and I'll see you back in a couple of seconds after the time travel.
Welcome back. I've performed a bit of editing and time travel magic, and we now have our completed choreography diagram. And I can see there are a few different items, including a request, a contract acceptance, infrastructure setup, system testing, and operational service. I also now know from what you told me before that the yellow ones are initiating and the grey ones are not. So that's going to be equal to false. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit about how this choreography diagram might be used by businesses and corporations and how it might help them in their modeling experience to get something out of this process?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. We have completed the diagram, and the real benefit, the real take-home message for this is it's actually a very good place to start. When I hear that organizations that are starting to do business process modeling or looking at the BPMN, the business process model and notation language, quite often they want to start with business process diagrams, which is a natural thing to want to try and describe all the work that's being done in all the activities and how those things are all connected. But in many ways, a diagram like this, the choreography diagram, is like a precursor, and it gives you the opportunity to describe the interaction between different parties. And that's a very useful thing to do before you start diving into all of the detail. So you can just see some very clear, almost sort of architectural or archetypal ways that these particular participants are interacting with each other. And again, I refer back to the name, the choreography. It is like a dance sequence. It's a series of steps, a series of movements that are, creating some understanding of what the messages are. And here we can see the messages laid out very clearly. And we could, because they're elements in the tool, we could drill down into those and we could link other elements to it. And Scott, this is always the way, as you would have seen in previous videos, me mentioning the fact that connecting the elements to either higher level concerns or the more detailed concerns is always a very powerful thing with the model. So this request for proposal, we could create that request for proposal in Enterprise Architect, and we could link that model or that document to this element. We could also get it through our integration services to SharePoint or to other tools where the information is being stored. So lots and lots of possibilities. In many ways, as always, we've only really scratched the surface of this diagram and the tool's potential in this area.
No, that's fantastic, and I'm assuming that you could use that request for proposal on another diagram that links to requirements that describe what the proposal could contain, or a use case that shows how people interact with the proposal, or a strategy for why the proposal exists, and many, many more different objectives, including a linked document that shows a template for the proposal.
Yeah, exactly, Scott. So it's kind of an endless network or map of things, and that's always the idea, is to try and create an articulated model rather than a model with individual parts or model fragments in it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for showing us the choreography diagram as part of BPMN. It's great to see how it all comes together, and I think it's really good that you can see what messages are initiating things and what parties are involved, and there's nice logic and structure to the design and modeling of it. As always, if you've enjoyed this video or any of our other videos in the Sparx Systems YouTube site, please like, comment and subscribe. We love getting feedback. We love hearing from you. If you have any training needs, please feel free to reach out to Stephen using the LinkedIn details in the comments below. And once again, Stephen, thank you for your expertise and for showing the choreography diagram. I think it's great to see how easy it is to create diagrams like this in Enterprise Architect. So thank you.
Always a pleasure to be here, Scott, sharing knowledge.